How's it going, guys? I hope you're all doing well out there today, wherever you are in the world. And this is part 2 of my pedalboard build with the new Friedman pedalboard system. I'm really pleased with how it came out. If you haven't seen part 1 already, I'll leave a link up above. And that was all the information about what's being used, the build, and the start of putting it all together. I ran out of time. I've been away on tour in Sweden and then on a UK run, and I didn't want to rush anything, so I decided to do it in 2 parts and really take my time. So at the moment, this is about 98% of the way there. I'm waiting on a few cables that I need just to finish off tidying up the underneath. So I'm waiting on a few TRS cables for my foot switch outputs, which will eventually be on the buffer bay, the remaining 2 outputs. But at the moment, they're just plugged straight into their respective devices. Just for now, the TRS cables are coming. And also I'm waiting on one more splitter just to power my Moore baby tuner in the corner there. So I'm really pleased with how this came out. I love the pedalboard design. I've got to give a shout out to the PedalPatch cables as well. It's my first time using them, as I said in the first part, and they were so easy to put together, and I didn't have a single one that I put together not work. They've worked all off the bat perfectly, and it's been great. So that's been wonderful to keep the cable runs to a minimum. The Friedman power supply as well has been great because the outputs are 350. I have used sort of a daisy chain splitter on some of the low current analog pedals just to stretch the the power, make it go a little bit further and power all of this. It's only got 10 outlets, but it's currently powering all of this except the tuner, and it will power the tuner fine once I get the extra cable that I need. I've also been really pleased with the Friedman buffer bay as well. I've long wanted a single place to route all my cables to, but my board's always been cramped and, like I explained in the first video, never quite stable enough to include one. So that's great that that's a central place to plug all your cables in, and it's countersunk into the board as well. And like I said, when I get the extra cables, that will be my whole loom just going to one place. The buffer's really nice in that as well. So utilising the buffer bay connections and the complex routing that can be done within the GT1000 core, it lets me, per bank of presets, really configure how I want to run this. So at the moment, I'm running into my custom audio PT100, which is my main gigging amp at the moment. I set the effects loop to parallel. So what I'm doing is coming guitar into the board, the front end of the board, all the switching, out into the amp. Then I've got the effects send coming back in. That's going into the back end of the GT1000 core and then back out. So that's providing all delays and reverbs, back out into the return. If I wanted to run it into a series loop, I just have to reconfigure the GT1000 or create a second bank of sounds so that I don't have the kill dry on. If I want to run it in front of an amp, I can either change all the routing within the GT1000 and go straight into an amp, or I can just patch over between what would normally be the amp input and the send jacks on the buffer bay. So just a little patch cable in there, and then everything would work as it would, just minus the effects loop. I still am planning on creating some patches that involve the GT1000 core going straight into the board. So this board actually is fully self-contained as a direct rig. However, I've just got the Tone X, the IK Multimedia Tone X pedal. And what I can do with that is stick that on the floor next to it and run it where the amp input and the send would be. Run it there in the buffer bay just to the side of the board, and then run out of the GT1000, so what would be the return, I can run into a DI box and straight to the house and use all the stuff within that Tone X pedal. So yeah, this has really opened up a lot of stuff. I can also send MIDI to the Tone X pedal using the MIDI output on the buffer bay. So it's just a world of possibilities in a really small package, so I'm very pleased. So this pedalboard centres around the Musicom Labs EFX6M Lite. Yep, that's it. Switcher unit that I've been using for quite some time. And I do things a little bit different with a switcher. A lot of people use one loop per pedal and do loads of presets and stuff. I prefer sort of groups of pedals. So I've got a few pedals that run in front of the switcher so I can access them at any time. I've then got, I have loops for sort of a clean loop, which includes like compression and boost and light overdrive. A dirty loop. I've got loops for particular effects processors to keep them out of the chain when they're not being used. But on the whole, I just switch between 5 main sounds, and that's how I do it. So the routing goes, the guitar comes in, it goes straight to the Moore baby tuner. I was asked why I use a second tuner, although the GT1000 has one. I like a tuner right up front of my signal path. I like a single button that always gets me to a tuner. And also the GT1000, yeah, the way I'm using different routings per preset would make a tuner a bit difficult to use on there. So baby tuner first, then we're going into the Fox Rocks Octron pedal. The 3, I'm a big fan. I've used the 2 for years, but it was getting a bit cumbersome, so I bought the 3. So far so good. The 2 does have the edge for me, but the 3 is perfectly serviceable. Then we're down to the Fender Treadlight wah pedal, which is a nice format for a pedal board like this. It's not my favourite wah in the world, but it does sound very good. We then go off into the switcher. So loop number 1 is my Zoom MS50G, which handles some modulation, filters and things like that. It's my favourite pedal for filters, envelope filters and things like that. So I've got that in loop 1. Loop 2 is sort of my clean loop, so that includes my compressor. So we've got the Unit 67. I've then got Spark Mini, which is just my sort of clean boost. So if I'm on a clean tone and just want to push, that Spark booster does it. And then at the end of that path, I've got the J-Rocket Touch Overdrive for sort of a light overdrive. And I would say out of everything I've included on the board, that is the one that I'm debating whether I want to use that or not. To be perfectly honest with you, I had a nice gap down there that it fit perfectly in, and I was looking for a light overdrive, so that ticked the box. But it's quite mid-pushed, and it also sounds better to me, that pedal, at higher gain range, so that may get switched off. I love the DoD looking glass, but it was just finding a space for it. So the Touch is in contention. The next loop number 3, is the front end of the GT1000 core, so I'm using it in a 4-cable method sort of thing. So that's handling some modulation and bits and pieces, which we'll get to. But yeah, so that's the front end of the GT1000. And then loop number 4 is sort of a utility loop. In a rig where I'm using amp distortion like I am today, it's got the bucks and boost in it, which can be engaged, disengaged, depending on what I'm feeling. There's also a Friedman Dirty Shirley in that loop. So if I was to be using a clean amp, I can then use the Dirty Shirley for my gain and still boost it with the bucks and boost that's in the same loop. So sort of using that like a second amp channel, which is great. After that, we come out of the buffer bay into the front of the amp, and then we come amp send back into the buffer bay, into the back end of the GT1000 core, which is handling all my delays, reverbs and some mod, and then back to the effects return of the amp. So enough rambling about all that stuff, but if there's any questions, let me know. I realise I didn't explain it the clearest, but I'm happy to answer questions. But let's listen to some tones. So I'm running into my custom audio PT100, which really is my main gigging amp at the moment, if I'm not using the Kemper or some sort of other digital solution. And guitar I'm using is my relatively new to me Tom Anderson Hollow Classic, which I haven't really been able to put down since I got it, so that's a really good sign for a guitar. So my default preset, which is nothing on, I've not selected a preset. These Musicom Labs have like a default preset. So that's the clean channel of the amp with the Unit 67 compressor, and it sounds a bit like this. So all the verb that you're hearing is coming from the GT1000 core. What I can do within that preset as well is I've got an expression pedal hooked up to the GT1000, and it adds sort of an 80s rat kind of tone. So it's adding some modulated delay, some detune, and increasing the reverb mix. So it's nice to be able to go straight from sort of a funky clean tone straight to the 80s thing. Just with the expression pedal and not really changing a preset. If I'm doing a sort of clean gig, they're my main two sounds. So without the Unix, I run the amp sort of the clean channel is breaking up a little bit on the amp if you hit it. So I'll turn off the Unit 67. But then with the compressor, what I do is sort of level everything out and bring the volume down a little bit, so it cleans up that clean channel. But I feel like I'm getting a bit of harmonic excitement, for lack of a better term, out of the amp. So it's sort of taming it a little bit, and then with a humbucker. Just leveling everything out. That's sort of just how I like to run it. So within that loop as well, I've got a spark boost available to me just for a little lift. Probably sounds relatively indistinguishable on the recording, but on a gig that will just pop you out of the mix a little bit. So I use it for any just little clean passages that need a lift, and it's got the hold feature as well, where you can just hold it for a quick passage and it goes off. In the clean loop, I've also got the touch, which, like I said, I'm not bowled over by, but I just use it for a bit of a lift on the clean channel. And it's after the compressor at the moment, so if I turn the compressor off, I like it, I just don't love it. So compressor stays on all the time. I think I'm going to swap that touch out for something else, but that's what it sounds like, just for reference. So on this clean preset, I can also engage the front end of the GT1000 core, which has a few effects on it. So it's got the rotary speaker that I can ramp up and down, which is cool. I've also got a sort of poggy 12-string type thing. Again, kind of subtle, but it does work in, in a mix. Just gives you a little bit more sort of depth to those chords. And you can use it with the organ, with the rotary as well, to get more of an organ type sound. So that's cool. And then, as I mentioned, I've got the Friedman Dirty Shirley, which if I didn't have a distortion channel on the amp, I'd use that for my main gain sound. It does a low gain thing well, but this is sort of set up for a crunch now, so on the clean channel. That's with the compressor running before I can switch the compressor off. And if I was doing a gig with a clean channel, I'd have a bank that was switch that in specifically. And in that loop, I've also got the bucks and boost to push the Dirty Shirley if I want to. So my preset number 2 on here is it keeps the clean loop, clean channel, and just adds in the Zoom MS50G, which I can use for a variety of stuff. So I've got like a flanger. Phaser type. The Zoom's also got my main envelope filter sound. I absolutely love envelope filters, and this does one of my favourites. Sounds a bit like this. So that's, like I said, it's hit the MS50G is in loop 1, so it's hitting the compressor, which is how I like my filters. Just takes the edge off that attack. I also have some tones in here that are meant for using with distortion, really, so I'll show you those in a bit. I do have an ultra wet 80s chorus kind of tone in here. So the MS50 is providing the extra reverb, delay, chorus, etc. And on this preset as well, I can increase the wet level on the GT1000 with the expression. So now moving over to the third preset of this bank. It is my main crunch sound, so it's the channel 2 on the PT100 with no pedals, and then the GT1000 is just providing a little bit of delay and verb in the loop. And it's got I set my main crunch sound up so it's kind of gainy enough to do most things, but it still backs off nicely. And with the GT1000, at the moment it's got a slap back and a bit of verb. If I click this button, it changes it to a longer delay. On this patch, I can also push the expression pedal up and get more ambience out of the GT1000. So that's a long modulated delay and some more verb. As I said, I sort of set it up for a nice crunch, but I can boost it with the Buxton boost as well. I can hit it with the Unit 67 as well for a bit more sparkle. The next preset along is my affected lead tone, so it switches to channel 3 on the PT100, so a little bit more volume, a little bit more gain. It has some ambience from the GT1000 core, and the Zoom MS50G comes into play. So whatever I've got called up on there, it will add it to the lead tone. So at the moment I've got a phaser on there. As you can hear, it's got a bit of a slap back delay and some longer ambience as well. I can use my filter on a lead. I don't often, but you can. I've got a sort of Octavia kind of Hendrixy thing. There's an Octron, which when I don't use my Octron, I have a simulation of it, so it's sort of a octave down, octave up type thing. Octron does a better job, but that's perfectly serviceable. I've got a sort of tone bendery fuzz type thing. Also on this patch I can increase this for more ambience as I do on other presets. It sounds like this. For that sort of like broken Ian Thornley thing. I think that's about it, what I use on gain. And then my final preset is my just straight up lead sound. So channel 3, nothing engaged, and just a bit of delay. And what's great about this amp is that, again, it's got a whole ton of gain there, but it does back off really nicely. And again, that expression pedal just increases the delay and reverb. Now I can show off just the couple of pedals I've got out of the loop. So we've got the Fender Treadlight Wah. And it's a nice sounding wire. It's kind of throaty the way I've got it set up. Like I said, not my favourite wire in the world, but does the job. And then we've got the Fox Rocks Octron, which is just a mad beast. So if you don't know what the Octron is, it's you've got a sort of direct signal, then you've got an analog octave down, which is like a Boss OC2, and the octave up sort of like an Octavia. So if I show you just the Octavia on its own. And then it's nice, you can blend in the direct signal with that, so it's not so off the chain. And you just get that nice upper harmonic. You've also got your octave down like an OC2. And you can set it to, I've got it on mids at the moment, but you can go for a low octave. You know, it's just to do with the tonality, it doesn't make it any lower. And the octave up's also got a pure and a bright, so if I show you that again. So it's on pure at the moment. And then bright. Bright's probably more traditional Octavia, but I like it on the pure sound, a little bit less aggressive. And you can take the dry sound out altogether and do sort of more synthy type things. So it's a pedal that not many gigs actually call for, but it's a nice one to have on there for a little bit of fun. So I think that about covers it for today. That is my brand new pedal board. I'm really, really pleased with it. I've got a few more tweaks to make, a little bit more programming. I think I'm going to lose the touch overdrive and just waiting for those last couple of cables, but I'm really pleased. It's just unbelievably flexible given the footprint, and I really like these Friedman boards. The amount of space underneath for your wiring and things. I'm considering putting a few more bits underneath as well. I won't show you the underneath because it's not quite finished yet and I don't want to embarrass myself, but it's very easy to keep tidy. I just want to say a big thanks to the guys at Friedman for sending out this board for me to check out. I really, really dig it. And for the wonderful people at PedalPatch as well for providing the cables. I'll do a further video all about their cables as well. So for now, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And whatever you're doing with the rest of the day, I hope it's great. And I'll see you again in another video soon. Cheers, guys.